Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hi friends, welcome to this week's module, which is emotional empathy in machines. So in this week we are going to talk about how can we create machines which are not only emotionally intelligent but also which are empathetic. So they have some sense of empathy. It sounds uh, like sci-fi, but there are ways in which we can at least approximate it. So here is an outline for today's class. In today's class, we are going to look at empathy, try to understand what empathy itself is and what do we mean by the empathetic agents. We will next talk about how can we develop artificial empathy. Of course, in order to develop artificial empathy, we need to understand how empathy can be developed, is developed naturally among humans. Next, we will talk about how can we evoke empathy using these techniques that we have learned from the natural empathy evolution in the humans. Then, of course, we will be looking at how this empathy can be used or has been used in the virtual and robotic agents. We will talk about how empathy is something that is not just an emotional state, it's some beyond emotional state, and how can it be evoked. That, and we will finish the module with the evaluation of some performance metrics with that can be used to understand the naturalness or the empathetic interactions that are happening between the humans and the agents. Perfect. So with that, let us dive in with the first topic, empathy and the empathetic agents. So the very first thing that we want to ask ourselves is why empathetic agents? And in order to answer that, we need to let us revise first that what empathy is. So empathy, as we all know, empathy is the capacity of humans to understand what other humans are experiencing. And you may understand that this is different from sympathy. So this is basically an experience that you try to have what others are going through, and then in turn this helps you to comfort them in a better way, right? That is what the empathy is all about. And of course, this when as a human also you may have seen that we want to interact, we prefer interaction with the humans, we want to be around with those friends and colleagues and family members, those who are more empathetic to us rather than to us those who are not so much empathetic. The same idea is there behind the empathetic agents as well. And then underlying hypothesis is that if we can provide, if the virtual agents, let it be robots, machines, services, any emotionally intelligent component, if it can have empathetic responses, then that will lead to better, more positive and appropriate interactions with the humans. And this is what we want to enable. And this is something that is already this is what happens when two humans which are empathetic to each other, they interact, right? So there is a better conversation interaction, there is a more positive interaction, and it's also at the time it is appropriate, when to laugh, when not to laugh, for example, and things like that. So this is the same thing that we want the agents to have, so that they can behave in the similar fashion to us and the entire experience can be more positive for the humans. But it turns out that why giving this empathetic response also is going to make virtual agents more empathetic and more interactive, is because the underlying assumption that we have is we humans, we always prefer to interact with the machines in the same way that we prefer to interact with the other people. So we want other people to be empathetic. Similarly, we would like to have machines to be empathetic. And this is something that is not a very new phenomena, something that has been studied since long. So the underlying idea is that whatever entities that we are interacting with, if we can attribute human like qualities to them, if we can attribute human like qualities to those entities, then that entity becomes less familiar to us, even if it's a non-human like entity. And in turn, if it becomes less familiar to us, then we become more familiar, and the entire experience around this entity become more explainable or predictable to us, and hence we are very comfortable with that. So give you an idea, we can look at something that is known as anthropomorphic design. Some of you may have heard about it, but those who have not, we are going to look at this thing. So this underlying assumption that we are deriving, that humans would like to interact with the machines that have human like properties, is because we always have this tendency to feel better, comfortable around the things that are that have human like features, and hence we develop a tendency to provide human like characteristics to non life like artifacts. And this entire design is known as anthropomorphism. So anthropomorphism, of course, it's a Greek word which is made with two words, anthropos and morphe. Anthropos means, of course, human, morphe means shape or form. So basically anthropomorphism is all about having human like shape or form. But we will see that it's not only about the shape and the form, it's also about the behavior. But let us see, take an example here. So the word anthropomorphism itself says that okay, it's human like form or shape. So but as I said, it's not only about the form or the shape anymore, it's also about the way they interact with you. So we would like them to interact as humans interact with us, right? For example, looking to us with two eyes rather than four eyes. Who is stopping you to create four eyes in the robots or in the agents or in the systems, for example? No one, right? But then it turns out that the humans are always familiar. Humans would feel more familiar and comfortable around the robots which have two eyes, because of course they are human like, right? Because of anthropomorphic nature of us. But similarly, so this is behavior, and this is also about the interaction, and this is what we are talking about, the empathetic interaction. So we would like to have the non-human like artifacts to interact also with us just the way humans interact with us, right? So for example, uh, imagine that you can have a robot which can communicate to you using your brain signals. Okay, that sounds fascinating, but then at the same time, this is not how humans communicate to other humans. Well, most of the humans would not do that, some may claim, right? So the way humans communicate with other humans or interact with other humans is, for example, maybe using voice, of course using gestures, the way I'm using and the way we use with each other, things like that. Similarly, we would like to have the machines which can communicate to us using voice, which can communicate to us using gestures, and so on and so forth, of course facial expressions and on all that, right? And this is where we are talking about empathetic interaction as well. So you can see this image on the right hand side. I hope this image is clearly visible to you. So if you look at this image, for example, this looks cute to us, this looks appealing to us, or at least to the children, and to many of us also. And this is the underlying idea why we like cartoons, why we like caricatures and all that. Because for example, here you can see this is a picture of a mouse, but the mouse is depicting human like characteristics. What characteristics? Many different characteristics. For example, one, of course, it is having glasses. It's funny for a mouse to have glasses, but okay, humans have glasses, so it makes a bit more funny and more human like. It, okay, of course it is reading, of course it has dress and like humans, of course it is sleeping like humans, on a pillow and things like that, and it has socks like humans and all that, right? So basically all these are the human characteristics. So if you see the form also, okay, I mean it is trying to have glasses and trying to get the human like form. Behavior, it is reading. Okay, there is no interaction, but it can also interact, maybe using voice and all that. So this is what is the anthropomorphism all about. And because of the anthropomorphism, we have a tendency to provide human like characteristics to the non-human like artifacts. And why we do that? We do that because it makes the entire interaction more comfortable for us, and hence we get a more positive experience for the humans. So that is the underlying idea. But then we have to look at this anthropomorphic design with a bit of catch as well. So it turns out that there are three things that we are talking about, or mainly two things that we are talking about. Let's say one is of course the appearance, one is the appearance, which is the shape or the form. One is the function, which is the behavior, and of course the function can include the behavior and the interaction both. So it turns out, of course, it impacts the way we how we perceive it, how we interact with it, and in what sense we build the long-term relationships with it, right? And this is what this word is going to be very, very important for the people who are in the industry, because one problem is of the retention of the customer services and customer itself, right? So the customer, maybe they will start using your product, your services, your agents, your robots and all that, but with the time they are going to lose interest unless and until they are able to build a long-term relationship with it. And long-term relationships are only going to be built, not only, but can be built easily if you can have the services they can provide human like experiences to them. Okay, And but there is a catch here. So the catch that I wanted to talk about is that the appearance and its capabilities, or the appearance and the function of an agent. We can talk about an agent because it becomes easier to understand, but as I have said multiple times, that the same idea can be extended to the robots, services, and things like that. So the appearance of a robot should also match its capabilities, in the sense the form and the behavior, they should be in sync. And of course, in turn, it has to match the user's expectations. So just to make the thing a bit clear, please look at a picture, the picture that you have on your right side. So the picture that you have is, I'm not sure how many of you know, but this is the Sophia humanoid robot. Okay, so Sophia is supposed to be the most advanced, as of now, the most advanced humanoid robot. And if you look at the entire image of this Sophia robot, it's an anthropomorphic design. Why it's an anthropomorphic design? It looks like human, right? And it is behaving like human. It is sort of smiling also like humans to a certain extent. It has eyes like human, it has a form like human again, and ears and all that. But then again, what we want, as I said, that we want the appearance and the capabilities to match each other. And we will, and when they do not match each other, then what happens? Then the creepiness comes into the picture. So then the entire experience becomes more uncomfortable rather than being comfortable, right? Of course, I'm not sure, but for example, for some, it may be seen that, okay, while it looks like human, but then at the same time, if you look at the smile has some components which does not look like exactly like human. So there is a mismatch between these two, and maybe it is not going to give a very strong sense of comfort that you wanted it to have, right? So, and it turns out this is a very well studied and established phenomena, which is known as uncanny valley effect. So the uncanny valley effect is what? Uncanny valley effect, the term itself was coined by roboticist Masahiro in 1970s, which says that it's the dip in the emotional response of humans when there is a human-like characteristic that is being achieved by the robots or by the agents, right? So for example, just look at this graph and it is going to become very clear. On the x-axis, what you have is the human likeness or human like characteristics. Okay, you already have it is written here. So human likeness or human like characteristics, right? So basically, as you go on increasing from left to right, what you are seeing here, that you have certain robotic characters which are less human like, such as, for example, of course, R2D2, you may recall, very famous character from Star Wars movie. Of course, Wally, you may recall. And then the more you go on the right hand side, then you come till, for example, the Sins character in the Humans, the BBC series, and then Terminator in the T800, and Dolores, of course, in the West world, right? They look very much like humans. So on the x-axis, you have humans or the robotic agents looking less human-like from the on the left-hand side, but as you go on the right side, looking more human-like. Similarly, on the y-axis, what you have the familiarity, the sense of the comfort or the familiarity of the humans as rated by humans, right? So for example, what it is roughly trying to show you, the more the human likeness or the likelihood of looking like a human increases among the robotic characters, the familiarity of these agents also increases with the humans. And it makes sense, right? The more they are looking like human, the more you are feeling familiar about with them and around them. So for example, if you recall R2D2, or even for example Wally character that is there in front of you, I mean, okay, it was so popular because at the same time it was not human, but at the same time it had some human like behavior and shape as well. So for example, it had two cute eyes, and it was able to navigate and things like that. So not exactly like human, but it has some human like form, and people liked it a lot. Similarly was the case with the R2D2, and so on and so forth. And similarly, if you recall this again, another very popular character from the Star Wars movie, which is C3PO. So C3PO, of course, also if you recall, it was more or less like quite it had like more human like characteristics, and hence the familiarity or the popularity of this character was also quite high. But suddenly what started happening, now you see, then this is the dip that we are talking about. This entire reason is the dip that we are talking about. Now suddenly in this area, what we are looking at, that even though the likelihood likelihood of looking like the human or human likeness is increasing among the characters, there is a sudden dip in the familiarity. So, sir, of course, I mean, it started, you can talk about, if you recall the iRobot, the Sony character from the iRobot, this is the Sony character from the iRobot. Of course, with the T-800 skeletal form of the Terminator, similarly, the sins, as I said, and so on and so forth. So basically what is happening in the case of all these characters, the gunslinger in the Westworld and all these characters, that they are looking more, they have started to look like more like humans, but at the same time, there is a mismatch between their form. I mean, I will note it down again so that you can recall it again. So there is mismatch between their form and their behavior, and more importantly, the user's expectations. What do we mean by that? So if you look at the form looks quite like human. Okay, I mean, for example, if you look at the Sony robot itself, it looks quite like human, but at the same time, the behavior was not exactly like the humans. It has some superpowers also, or maybe, for example, there are certain things that were looking like creepy. So for example, all these things coming out of the head and things like that, right? Similarly, if you look at, for example, the skeletal form of the Terminator, I mean, this particular character, it's looking very much like human, but at the same time it looks like a distorted human body. I mean, this does not look very good to us. I mean, this does not look very comfortable to us, right? I mean, this looks like, I mean, it is missing some limbs, some parts, and this and that, so it's like horrific. It's not very so then, of course, like, we do not feel comfortable around these kind of designs, because of course one thing is the form is looking like human, but at the same time is not like humans, and is creepy itself. And then the form and the behavior, maybe they both are also not matching. Okay, I mean, if you are looking like human, if the robot is looking like human, it should also behave like human, and it's really hard to behave like humans, because of course the naturalness that is there in the interaction, the voice and all that. I mean, it's not easy to plug in, and of course there is a lot of research that is going on these things. And more importantly, there is a mismatch with the user expectations. When you show a character which is looking like a human, the user's expectation is, okay, it is going to behave like a human, but when it is looking like human and it is not behaving like a human, while behaving like human, as I said, is always challenging, then there is a mismatch with the user's expectations, and that is where, the familiarity or the popularity, it starts dipping in, and that is what is essentially, we can say, is happening with the uncanny valley reason. But then what happens suddenly, then again we see, but as we cross a particular threshold, 90% or whatever, like maybe something that is very close to human. So for example, this character, of course, like played by Arnold Schwarzenegger in this case, and then of course in Dolores Westworld, what is happening? I mean, okay, with this, the likeliness has increased a lot, but at the same time, the familiarity or the popularity also has increased a lot. So one simple thing, okay, they are looking very much like humans and they are behaving very much like humans. So it's as simple as that. There is a very good match between the expectations of the users. Okay, if they are going to look like humans, they are going to behave like humans, and that is how they are behaving in this particular case. And that is where, this is the point that you can also say that if you know or recall the Turing test, to certain extent, this is where we can say that they may have passed the Turing test also for the humans, because for a normal human, it may be hard to differentiate, okay, whether, for example, this character is a human or this character, for example, is a robotic agent, because of course they are looking very much like human, and of course they are behaving very much like human. So maybe they are passing the Turing test also after this certain reason. Nevertheless, I mean, it's really hard to achieve this particular reason, but of course, I mean, what you want to do is, do you not want to get your design trapped in the uncanny valley effect? Okay, so that is what is about the uncanny valley effect. So coming back to the summary of this thing, what we wanted to understand, why we want to have empathetic agents. We want to have empathetic agents because it makes the entire interaction more positive, as simple as that. And why it makes the entire interaction more positive? Because it gives us a sense of familiarity when the agents are interacting with us just like the humans are. And this is what is known as the anthropomorphism or anthropomorphic design. In the anthropomorphic design, what we want to have a human anthropomorphic design. It allows, or it is all about a tendency to attribute human-like characteristics to non-lifelike artifacts, which may include their changing their shape to like humans, changing their behavior like humans, changing their interaction like humans. While we are doing it, and that is the underlying hypothesis of the empathetic interaction. But while we are doing it, we should be cautious about uncanny valley, because it may happen that we are going to make their form like humans, but they are not able to achieve an interaction like humans, and that is where there is going to be a dip in the emotional response or in their familiarity or in their likeness. So basically what we would like to have, of course this can be our holy grail in some, this can be called as our holy grail, which can be a bit difficult to achieve, like just human like form, human like behavior, human like empathetic reaction, but maybe we can achieve till here, and that can also be quite good, or for example even here or even here or anywhere in this region, right? Okay, so with that's about the why empathy and what do we mean by the empathetic agents and why do we like them so much. Now let us try to understand the next module of the class.